Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be looking into a really, really tough topic today. We're going to be trying to get a better understanding of this surge of anti-Shia violence and oppression that's been going on, during January 2025.
Yeah, this is unfortunately becoming a recurring theme.
Yeah. And we're going to be pulling from a recent monthly report from Shia Rights Watch.
Great organization.
Yeah, they do, the tough but very important work of documenting these human rights violations against Shia Muslims globally.
It is incredibly important work.
And, just a warning to our listeners, this report contains, some truly horrible, grim incidents.
Yeah.
From really just blatant terrorist attacks to the kind of state-sanctioned discrimination that can be, a little bit harder to see, but just as damaging in the long run.
Absolutely. What I find so interesting about this report is that it actually goes beyond just listing those incidents. They actually connect the dots and show how some of these events that seem maybe isolated actually fit into a much bigger and more worrying trend.
Yeah.
The nuance there.
Yeah, you're not just getting, like a news feed. You're getting analysis.
Exactly, yeah.
So let's jump right in. Let's start by discussing Pakistan, specifically the Upper Kurram region. The report from Shia Rights Watch paints a really, really just horrifying picture. Over 200 deaths because of this siege by extremist groups. And it's not just combatants. We're talking about women, children, entire families trapped, and just suffering.
Yeah, and what really strikes me is the complete lack of an effective government response. The report details the killing of Ali Raza Rizvi. He was protesting and demanding that the government step in and protect these communities. And his death, I think, really speaks volumes about the government's failure to act and the fear within the Shia community.
It's just like they're being abandoned by the very people that are supposed to keep them safe.
Absolutely.
The report even mentions attacks on aid convoys that are trying to get into Kurram. It's almost as if these extremist groups are trying to deliberately cut off any lifeline to these communities.
It really begs the question, what is behind this particular crisis? Because we can't look at the siege in isolation. To understand what is happening in Upper Kurram, you really have to consider the decades of historical tensions and sectarian violence that have plagued Pakistan. It's this complex web of political and religious factors that have created this tinderbox.
So we're not just talking about, like a sudden burst of violence.
Mm-hmm.
This is really rooted in a much deeper conflict.
Yeah, a much longer running conflict.
Right.
Precisely. And, it's easy to get lost in the statistics, but we can't forget that we're talking about real people, real lives shattered. The report shares the story of Saqib Hasnain. He was kidnapped and executed simply because he was Shia. And it's a reminder of the human cost of this conflict, the everyday fear that hangs over these communities.
Oh, man. Saqib's story is just, it really got to me. And, it makes you wonder how people can even function or go about their daily lives with this kind of threat just constantly looming over them.
It's a testament to their resilience, but it also underscores the urgency of the situation. Sadly, Saqib's story isn't unique. The report details a string of attacks. The attack on Balashkal village, the bombing of the Imam Barga Mosque in Kulachi. It's relentless, and it all points to this extreme vulnerability of Shia communities in Pakistan.
Yeah. And to make matters even worse, it's not just the violence. The report mentions the arrest of Muzammil Hussein Fassi for simply speaking out against the government's inaction.
Right.
And that's a whole other level of oppression, silencing dissent.
It's silencing dissent and further isolating these communities. It's a classic tactic used by regimes to maintain control, right? By stifling free speech, they're hoping to prevent any organized resistance or criticism of their policies.
Right.
And it's not just about individuals like Muzammil. The report also describes this attack on a Shia religious monument in Lahore, resulting in both deaths and injuries. This isn't just random violence. This is the deliberate targeting of cultural and religious symbols.
So they're being attacked on multiple fronts.
Multiple fronts.
Physically, politically, and even culturally.
And think about the long-term impact of this kind of attack, right? It's not just about the immediate damage. It's about the erosion of identity, the attempt to erase their history and heritage.
It's like trying to break their spirit.
Exactly. And make them feel invisible, powerless.
Yeah.
The Pakistan section of the report concludes with this really haunting image, women and children injured in these ongoing Kurram attacks, and it's a stark reminder of the human cost of inaction, the suffering that continues as long as these communities are denied basic protection and security.
It's a powerful image that really drives home the urgency of the situation. So while Pakistan is, pretty clearly a hotbed of anti-Shia violence, the report also reveals a different kind of oppression that's happening in Bahrain. What really stood out to me was that the largest Shia Friday prayer congregation has now been banned for 4 straight months.
That's a huge red flag when it comes to religious freedom, which is a fundamental human right. And it suggests that the Bahraini government is systematically targeting Shia religious practices.
Yeah, it's not just about preventing prayer. It's about controlling their ability to gather, to express their faith openly and collectively.
And this is happening within this broader context of political and religious tension in Bahrain. Despite being the majority, the Shia population has long faced marginalization and discrimination from the Sunni-led government.
Right, and the report highlights a parliamentary finding of employment discrimination.
Yeah.
Apparently, Shia citizens are disproportionately unemployed, even though there is a large foreign workforce in Bahrain.
That's a clear indicator of systemic discrimination.
Wow.
It suggests that the government is either directly or indirectly creating barriers to employment for Shia citizens and effectively limiting their economic power and opportunities.
And then on top of the economic squeeze, the report mentions arbitrary arrests of Shia individuals, which just further adds to this climate of fear and oppression.
Yeah, these arrests often lack due process, which means that people can be detained indefinitely without even knowing the charges against them. And it creates this chilling effect where people are afraid to speak out or even practice their faith openly.
So in Bahrain, it's less about outright violence and
Right.
more about this this insidious systematic effort to control and suppress the Shia population.
Exactly. It's a different form of oppression,
Yeah.
but it's just as damaging in the long run.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a real contrast, isn't it? In Pakistan, we see this raw, brutal violence, and then in Bahrain, it's much more subtle, it's more bureaucratic, but no less effective at silencing dissent.
Yeah, it's a reminder that oppression can wear many masks. It's not always about bombs and bullets. Sometimes it's about economic policies, legal loopholes, and that slow, grinding erosion of basic freedoms.
Absolutely, and it's often a combination of those factors that creates the most suffocating environment for minority groups.
Right.
Take, for instance, the parliamentary finding in Bahrain about the employment discrimination. It's not just about individuals facing prejudice. It's about these systemic barriers that prevent Shia citizens from, getting ahead, from achieving economic independence.
It's about keeping them trapped in a cycle of poverty and dependence.
Exactly, and that economic vulnerability makes them even more susceptible to other forms of control. When you combine economic marginalization with restrictions on freedom of speech and assembly, you create a situation where people are afraid to speak out, afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah, because they have so much to lose.
Yeah.
They might fear losing their jobs, their homes, even their freedom.
Of course.
It's a very effective way to silence dissent.
Very, very effective. And that's why the situation in Pakistan feels so volatile. The Shia community there is facing not just the violence, but also this pervasive sense of being abandoned by their own government.
Yeah, the siege in Upper Kurram is such a heartbreaking example. Hundreds of people, including innocent women and children, have died because of a lack of access to basic necessities, and the government's response has been, lukewarm at best.
And the report points to the killing of Ali Raza Rizvi, the protester who was demanding action, as a real turning point. It was a moment that crystallized the growing distrust and anger within the Shia community.
It's hard to imagine the level of despair they must feel,
Yeah.
being trapped in this siege, surrounded by extremist groups and feeling abandoned by their own government.
Absolutely. And the attacks on aid convoys, as we discussed earlier, just compound that sense of isolation and desperation. It's a deliberate tactic to cut them off from any outside support, to break their spirit.
Yeah. The story of Saqib Hasnain, who was executed simply for being Shia, really brings home the human cost of this conflict. It's a stark reminder that behind the statistics, behind all the political maneuvering, are real people whose lives are being destroyed.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the physical violence. Remember that attack on the Shia religious monument in Lahore? That wasn't just an act of vandalism. It was a deliberate attempt to erase their cultural and religious identity, to really strike at the heart of their community.
Yeah, you see a similar tactic being used in Syria, where the report documents the desecration of the Mohsen Ibn Hussein shrine in Aleppo. It's about, it's about more than just destroying buildings. It's about attacking their faith, their heritage, their very sense of who they are.
Exactly. It's psychological warfare. It's designed to demoralize and disenfranchise an entire community.
And while the violence in Pakistan and Syria might grab the headlines, the situation in Saudi Arabia reveals a different kind of oppression, one that's more, insidious, more hidden from view.
The report focuses on the executions of Abdullah Ahmed al-Salim and Ali Abdul Mansur al-Sulaiman, which raised serious concerns about the fairness and transparency of the Saudi justice system.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how many other cases like this are happening under the radar, hidden behind the closed doors of the Saudi legal system.
And it's not just about capital punishment. The report also highlights the case of Mohammed Boujabara, who was arrested for performing a religious poem. It's a reminder that even expressing your faith peacefully can be dangerous in Saudi Arabia.
It seems like the Saudi government is determined to control every aspect of Shia life, from their religious practices to their cultural expressions.
And this kind of repression creates a climate of fear and self-censorship, where people are afraid to speak out. They're afraid to challenge the authorities even when their rights are being violated.
So we're seeing a pattern here, aren't we? Whether it's through, brute force in Pakistan and Syria, or through more subtle forms of control in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, Shia communities are facing this increasingly hostile and dangerous environment.
And that hostility is fueled by this complex mix of historical grievances, political opportunism, and just sectarian hatred.
It's like this toxic brew that's been simmering for centuries, and it seems to be reaching a boiling point in many parts of the world.
And the question is, what can be done to cool things down, to break this cycle of violence and oppression?
Yeah, that's a question I was hoping you could help us answer. It all just feels so overwhelming, so intractable. Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is awareness. We need to shine a light on these atrocities to make sure that the world knows what's happening to Shia communities. That's why the work of organizations like Shia Rights Watch is so crucial. They're on the ground documenting these human rights violations and advocating for justice.
But it's not enough to just document these abuses, right? We need to hold the perpetrators accountable. We need to see concrete action, not just empty words of condemnation.
Absolutely. That means putting pressure on governments to investigate and prosecute those responsible for these crimes, whether it's extremist groups carrying out the attacks or government officials engaging in systematic discrimination.
And it means calling out the international community for its inaction.
Yeah.
Too often, these atrocities are met with, silence or indifference. We need to make it clear that the world is watching and that these crimes will not be tolerated.
Absolutely. And beyond accountability, we need to address the root causes of this problem. That means tackling the sectarian hatred that fuels so much of the violence. It means promoting dialogue and understanding between different religious groups.
It sounds like such a daunting task, especially in places where the tensions are so high.
It is, but it's not impossible. We've seen throughout history that even the most deeply entrenched conflicts can be resolved through dialogue and reconciliation.
But dialogue alone won't solve the problem, right?
Yeah.
We also need to address the political and economic inequalities that often fuel resentment and unrest.
You're absolutely right. Empowering marginalized communities, giving them a voice in the political process, ensuring they have equal access to education and economic opportunities. These are all crucial steps in building a more just and equitable society.
It's about creating a world where everyone feels, valued, respected, and secure, regardless of their faith.
And that's a world worth fighting for.
It's a vision that really gives me hope. Even amidst all this darkness, But it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the challenge and to wonder what difference one person can really make.
I understand that feeling, but it's important to remember that even small actions can have this ripple effect. Think about the work of Shia Rights Watch. They started as this small group of activists determined to shine a light on these human rights abuses, and now the reports are being read by policymakers, journalists, and concerned citizens all over the world.
So they're amplifying the voices of those who have been silenced. They're bringing their stories to a global audience.
Exactly, and that kind of exposure can create real pressure for change. It can force governments to be more accountable, to reconsider their policies and to take steps to protect the rights of their citizens.
So what you're saying is that we don't have to wait for for governments or international organizations to act. We can start making a difference right now in our own communities.
Absolutely, and there are so many ways to get involved. You can educate yourself about the issue. You can share information with your friends and family. You can support organizations like Shia Rights Watch that are working on the ground, and you can you can speak out against injustice whenever you see it.
It's about recognizing that silence is not an option. When we turn a blind eye to oppression, we become complicit in it.
And it's not just about speaking out, it's about listening to the stories of those who have been affected by this violence, understanding their perspectives and building these bridges of empathy and understanding.
It's about challenging our own biases and prejudices,
Yeah.
Confronting the ways in which we might be contributing to the problem, even unintentionally.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity,
Right.
realizing that an attack on one community is an attack on us all.
It's easy to get caught up in the statistics, the reports, the global picture, but it's so important to remember that behind every number, every incident is a human story.
And that's where the real impact of this deep dive lies, right? We're not just processing data, we're confronting human suffering, resilience, and the fight for survival.
Think about that elderly Alawite couple in Syria, Sheikh Ali and Nariman, murdered in their own home. It's just a gut punch, a reminder that this violence is personal. It's tearing families apart.
And what about those 6 caretakers of the Sayyidah Zainab Shrine?
Yeah.
Executed simply for their service to their faith. It's easy to gloss over names on a list, but these are individuals with lives, families, communities that are now shattered.
Yeah, their stories, while incredibly hard to hear, are so important because they force us to look beyond the headlines and see the individual tragedies behind the statistics.
And it's not just about mourning the victims, though. It's about understanding the ripple effects of this violence, the trauma that lingers long after the headlines fade. The displacement, the fear, the distrust, the loss of faith in institutions that are meant to protect. These are the invisible scars that can cripple a community for generations.
And that's why organizations like Shia Rights Watch are so crucial. They're not just documenting the violence; they're supporting survivors, advocating for their rights, and working to rebuild shattered lives.
It's about giving a voice to those who have been silenced, empowering them to reclaim their narratives and fight for justice.
And that fight for justice needs to happen on multiple levels, right?
Right.
We need accountability for the perpetrators, but we also need to dismantle the systems that allow this kind of oppression to flourish.
Absolutely. You're talking about the political systems that silence dissent, the economic policies that create and exploit inequalities, the social structures that perpetuate prejudice and intolerance. We need to address the root causes, not just the symptoms.
So where do we go from here? What can we, as individuals, do to make a difference?
It starts with each one of us by educating ourselves, speaking out against injustice, supporting organizations like Shia Rights Watch. we can contribute to creating a world where all people are treated with dignity and respect. It's about recognizing our shared humanity,
Mm.
understanding that an attack on one community is an attack on us all. And ultimately, it's about building a world where faith is a source of strength and unity, not a tool of division and violence.
Well, this has been a heavy but incredibly important deep dive. Thank you for taking us through this difficult but crucial topic.
I thank you for having me. It's been a privilege to share these stories and insights.
As we conclude, we want to leave you with this thought. What will you do to make a difference? Will you be a bystander, or will you be an advocate for justice and peace? The choice is yours. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better world.